Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Dan with OneUp Insights. Today is episode 2 of our Power BI tutorial series where we're talking about data modeling and why it is so important. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So our data model in Power BI is the foundation of any good solid report. It's going to define how our tables relate to one another, and it's that data model and the quality of it is going to dictate how efficiently our visuals can render all the results of the calculations we're performing. As your data continues to get larger and larger, your data model becomes much more of a consideration. Because if you've got a billion rows compared to 50 rows, that's a whole different ballgame, really, when it comes to Power BI. So now when it comes to building out our model, we're going to be working towards something called a star schema, which is going to be a fact table surrounded by dimensional tables. Your fact tables are going to hold your quantitative or transactional data. And like in this instance, in our model here, we have our attendance table, which for each date, we have a record for each student and whether they were present, tardy, or absent. And it's very similarly with our grades, a record for each student for each term and the numeric score for each subject they have. Now, we have these other classes, students, teachers, and classes, teachers tables, which function as our dimensional table. And you may be asking, why is a star schema so important? And the core reason is efficiency. We could, in theory, create one giant table for our attendance and grades, so really two big tables, that would have all of the descriptive attributes for the student based off of student ID and the class based off of class ID. So we'd end up with 15 or 20 different columns, kind of like I have in this Google Sheet here, where we have a date, a student ID, and then all the student information and whether they were present or absent and the reason. And this could technically go on for infinity for billions of rows. But that gets really, really inefficient because text fields are much heavier than basic numerical fields or ID fields saying it's 1 or 0. Imagine instead of having to load 800,000 rows of this, we can instead just load the, say, 500 students we have just once, and then just reference the student ID in that original fact table to be able to pull in the student information just when we need it, as opposed to bringing it in literally millions of times. So we can go ahead and start looking at actually how to build out that star schema by hitting close and apply on Power Query here. And this should take you to a model view. And if not, you can go to this on the left-hand column and there's report view, table view, and model view. Click on the model view and you'll get a screen that looks something like this. And you'll see lots of lines and arrows and ones and dotted lines and things like that. And we're going to walk through kind of what this means and how we're going to get this cleaned up. So by default, Power BI will link fields with a similar key field between them. So if I hover over one of these lines, you'll see class ID between classes and classes teachers gets highlighted to show that it's automatically linking. But we're actually going to want to do quite a bit to this so we can understand when we need to build this from scratch. Because oftentimes when you're bringing in data from databases or other sources, the names probably, or not probably, they may not match one for one. And so you'll need to know how to link these together on your own. So what I'm going to do is just right click on each of these lines and delete relationships and go ahead and click yes. And I understand what is happening here. Okay, so now we're left with these 6 tables. And so like we showed in the image before with a fact table surrounded by dimensional tables, we can drag and drop these tables around by just holding left click and moving them to where we need. And so we know our grades table is a fact table. Our attendance table is also a fact table. And so then we have these other 4 dimensional tables that can surround it. So when it comes to making relationships between tables, there's a couple of different options. And so classes and teachers, which we already have we used the merge queries function earlier to kind of build one combined version of this to better work out with our star schema. But for example, we could drag the class ID, we could drag the teacher ID between teachers and classes and link those two together. And we're going to be brought up with a new screen here. And It's going to be showing which tables we're going from and to, and then the key fields are being linked on. And so we see teacher ID and teacher ID. And by default, it's saying one-to-one cardinality. Now, cardinality relates to how many of the key field is present on both sides of the table. And you've got these four options here. And so in this one instance, one-to-one is what we want. And this is correct. And that's because we have exactly one teacher assigned to exactly one class on both sides of those. And the cross-filter direction is both here. And we'll get a little bit more into cross-filter direction here, but for the most part, single, which is not available for this, is going to be the option you want. So when you hit save, you can see how these link together. But because we already created a combined classes and teachers query here, we actually don't need these teachers and classes individual tables here anymore. It's just going to be redundant and add a little bit of extra stuff. So to fix that, we can go back to transform data, and we can right click on both the classes and teachers and hover over this enable load and uncheck it. And what that's going to do is prevent it from loading in to our data view when we're ready to start building visualizations. We still want to keep the include and report refresh checked here though, because these two queries are referenced by classes and teachers. So if there are updates in the background to these, they'll still pass through to our new classes and teachers section here. Now, when we click close and apply, now we'll see those two tables have disappeared, and we can move on to building out the rest of our star schema. So from our grades table, all we have to do is drag and drop an ID field to a matching other ID field to get that relationship going. So that way, whenever we want to reference what class a student was in, we can easily see all of the classroom and teacher details that are present there. And we see that class ID is highlighted in both. We see a many to one cardinality relationship, which means in our grades table, because each student can be in it can appear more than once and have grades across multiple classes, there's going to be more than one of the same class ID present for each student. But in our classes and teachers, there's only going to be a single class ID. So that's how the many to one works. And the cross filter direction, we're going to keep as single here and click OK. We're going to talk more about cross filter direction later on. Same thing for grades to students. We can drag class ID to here. Actually, we don't want to do that. We see we get a warning for many to many, and why that's not so great. We actually want to go from student ID to student ID. That gets us our one-to-many relationships. Star schema is really all about trying to build one-to-one or one-to-many relationships. Many-to-many can end up with a lot of unintended consequences, really affect your performance. And so that's the importance of having nice, clean data so you can get these one-to-many relationships that are active. And we can see student IDs are there and click OK. And then we kind of repeat this same process for our attendance fact table. And we can drag student ID to student ID. Same thing. We got the good many to one single cross filter direction that we like. Hit OK. And then we can go from class ID to class ID. Same process here. And we can hit save. So now that these relationships are created, you have a star schema. You can go and start building visualizations with this data. But you may be in a situation with your data at work or on a personal project where you have one giant flat, really wide file. I've seen some flat file polls that may have 300 plus columns with all these descriptive fields. And when you try and load that into Power BI, especially if you've got millions or tens of million plus rows, you can really run into some performance issues fast. So what we're going to cover in the next video is how you can take one of these giant flat files and actually create a star schema out of it so you can have that performance you need for a really solid data model for your dashboard. That'll wrap up this initial star schema video. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and visit my website to download the files as well so you can follow along at home on your learning Power BI journey. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.